Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Foundation. Detective Ray Morrison had seen enough darkness in his 15 years with the NYPD to know when something was wrong. But nothing had prepared him for the quiet unraveling of his own home. At 42, Ray was a man who believed in absolutes: right and wrong, loyalty and betrayal, justice and consequence. His steel-gray eyes and weathered face told the story of someone who'd stared down killers and never blinked first. When he'd married Claire Hartwell 8 months ago, Ray thought he'd finally found his anchor. Claire, 34 with auburn hair and emerald eyes, worked as a real estate agent specializing in luxury properties. She was successful, charming, and came with 5-year-old Emma, a quiet, thoughtful child with her mother's green eyes and blonde hair that caught the light like spun gold. Ray had embraced fatherhood with the same intensity he brought to everything else. His own father had abandoned him when he was 7, leaving him with a mother who worked 3 jobs just to keep them afloat. He'd sworn never to be that man, never to let a child feel unwanted or unsafe. The Morrison family had seemed perfect from the outside. Ray had bought a house in Westchester County, a 4-bedroom colonial with a white picket fence and a tire swing in the backyard. Claire had insisted on the neighborhood, claiming it was perfect for Emma's development. Ray had agreed, despite the hour-long commute to the precinct. But perfection, Ray had learned, was often just a mask for something rotten underneath. The first sign came 3 weeks after they'd moved in. Emma, who had been a cheerful, talkative child during their courtship, had grown increasingly withdrawn. She barely touched her meals, pushing food around her plate while offering polite apologies. "Sorry, Dad, I'm not hungry," became her nightly refrain. Ray noticed how she flinched when adults approached too quickly, how she developed dark circles under her eyes despite going to bed early. When he brought up his concerns to Claire, she dismissed them with a wave of her hand. "She's adjusting, Ray. Moving is traumatic for children. She'll get used to it." But Ray's instincts, honed by years of reading people's lies and fears, told him otherwise. He began paying closer attention to the patterns in their household, the subtle dynamics he'd initially missed. Claire had been working longer hours lately, often taking calls late at night and stepping outside to talk. She'd grown distant in their bedroom, claiming exhaustion from showing properties to demanding clients. When Ray suggested family activities, she'd find excuses: work commitments, social obligations, Emma's supposed need for routine. Meanwhile, Emma continued to fade before his eyes. The vibrant child who used to ask him about his cases and beg for bedtime stories had become a ghost in her own home. Ray's partner, Detective Luis Santos, had noticed a change in him too. They were sitting in their unmarked car outside a suspect's apartment when Luis finally spoke up. "You look like hell, Morrison. What's eating you?" Ray stared through the windshield at the gray October sky. "Just family stuff. Nothing I can't handle." "Family stuff, huh?" Luis, a father of 3, understood the weight behind those words. "You know, my Maria went through a phase when she was Emma's age. Stopped eating, had nightmares. Turned out a teacher at school was inappropriate." The words hit Ray like ice water. He'd been thinking like a husband, not like a detective. He'd been looking for obvious signs of abuse while missing the subtle indicators that something was deeply wrong in his stepdaughter's world. That evening, Ray watched Emma more carefully during dinner. The way she glanced nervously toward the front door when they heard cars pass. How she seemed to shrink into herself when Claire answered her phone. The careful way she chose her words, as if she were walking through a minefield. After Emma went to bed, Ray found Claire in their home office, typing furiously on her laptop. When she saw him, she quickly closed the screen. "Just finishing up some listing descriptions," she said, but her smile seemed forced. Ray nodded, but filed the behavior away. Years of interrogating suspects had taught him to catalog inconsistencies, to watch for tells that revealed deeper truths. Later that night, as Claire slept beside him, Ray stared at the ceiling and made a decision. Whatever was happening to Emma, whatever was causing her retreat into herself, he would find it. And when he did, there would be consequences. Ray Morrison was not a man who forgave betrayal. He'd learned that lesson early, watching his mother struggle to raise him alone while his father started a new family across town. He'd seen too many victims destroyed by people they trusted, too many families shattered by those who were supposed to protect them. If someone was hurting Emma, if someone was threatening the only family he'd ever truly wanted, they would learn why Ray Morrison had never lost an interrogation. The storm was coming. Ray could feel it in his bones. Chapter 2. Cracks in the Facade. Ray's investigation began with the methodical approach he used on all his cases. He started documenting Emma's behavior patterns, noting her reactions to different stimuli, mapping the timeline of her withdrawal against Claire's schedule changes. The breakthrough came when he decided to pick Emma up from school early one Tuesday afternoon. Claire had mentioned a late showing, so Ray thought he'd surprise Emma with ice cream and maybe get her to open up. But when he arrived at Meadowbrook Elementary, he discovered something that made his blood run cold. Emma wasn't there. According to the office, Claire had called that morning to say Emma was sick and wouldn't be attending. Ray's hand instinctively moved to his service weapon as a dozen scenarios flashed through his mind. He called Claire's number, forcing his voice to remain calm. "Hey, babe, just thought I'd pick up Emma early. Where are you guys?" There was a pause that lasted a heartbeat too long. "Oh, Ray, I forgot to tell you. Emma woke up with a fever this morning. We're at Dr. Patterson's office right now." "Which location?" Ray asked, already knowing she was lying. Dr. Patterson only had one office, and Ray had driven past it on his way to the school. The main one on Elm Street. You know how these appointments run long. Ray ended the call and immediately phoned Dr. Patterson's office. No appointments for Emma Morrison or Emma Hartwell. No calls from Claire. The rage that built in Ray's chest was cold and calculating. Someone was playing games with his family, and Claire was either a victim or a participant. Given her lies, he was beginning to suspect the latter. Ray used his police resources to trace Claire's cell phone. The GPS showed her at an address in Yonkers, a luxury apartment complex called Harbor View. Not showing a house, not at a doctor's office, an apartment building where she had no legitimate business. Instead of confronting her immediately, Ray made another decision that would define everything that followed. He called in a favor from his contact at the phone company and requested Claire's call logs for the past 3 months. What he found painted a picture that made him want to break something. Multiple daily calls to and from a number registered to Trevor Ashford. Ray ran the name through the system and found Trevor was 36, had a record for assault from 8 years ago, and currently worked as a contractor. More importantly, Trevor Ashford lived at Harbor View Apartments, Unit 4B. Ray sat in his car outside the complex, watching the building like he was on surveillance. At 3:47 p.m., Claire's black BMW pulled into the parking garage. She didn't emerge for 2 hours. When she finally came out, she was smoothing her hair and checking her appearance in her phone's camera. But what made Ray's trigger finger itch was what happened next. Emma emerged from the garage stairwell, walking slowly, her head down. Her clothes were different from what she'd worn to bed the night before. Ray followed them home from a distance, his mind racing through the implications. Claire was having an affair. That much was obvious. But Emma's presence changed everything. What kind of mother brought her 5-year-old daughter to her affair partner's apartment? And why did Emma look like she'd rather be anywhere else in the world? That evening at dinner, Ray decided to test the waters. "How was the doctor visit today?" he asked casually. Emma's fork froze halfway to her mouth. She glanced quickly at Claire, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "It was okay," Emma whispered. "What did Dr. Patterson say about your fever?" Another glance at Claire. He said, "I need more rest." Ray felt something break inside his chest. His 5-year-old stepdaughter was being coached to lie to him. Someone had turned this innocent child into an accomplice to her mother's deception. "That's good advice," Ray said softly. "You know, Em, if you ever feel sick or scared or confused about anything, you can always talk to me. That's what dads are for." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded and returned to pushing food around her plate. After putting Emma to bed, Ray confronted Claire in their bedroom. "How was your showing today?" he asked, watching her face carefully. "Oh, it went well. Difficult clients, though. They had very specific requirements." She was undressing as she spoke, not meeting his eyes. What kind of property were they looking for? A 3-bedroom condo. Downtown area. You know how picky buyers can be. Every word was a lie. Ray could see it in her body language, hear it in the careful way she constructed each sentence. But more than that, he could smell another man's cologne on her clothes. Claire, Ray said quietly, is there anything you want to tell me? Anything at all? For a moment, her mask slipped. He saw fear flicker across her face before she regained control. I don't know what you mean, Ray. Is everything okay? You seem tense. Ray studied his wife's face, the woman he'd sworn to love and protect, who was now lying to him while involving his stepdaughter in God knew what kind of situation. Everything's fine, he said finally. Just tired from work. But as Claire fell asleep beside him, Ray stared into the darkness and began planning. He had enough experience with cheating spouses from his caseload to know how this typically played out. The affair would continue until Claire felt confident enough to ask for a divorce, probably with some story about incompatibility or his job being too demanding. What she didn't know was that Ray Morrison never walked away from a fight, and he never forgave betrayal. Claire had made the mistake of involving Emma in her deception, and that elevated this from a personal matter to something far more serious. Tomorrow, Ray would begin gathering evidence. Not for a divorce attorney. Ray had bigger plans than that. Plans that would ensure Claire and her lover understood the consequences of their choices. Some people learned the hard way that certain men should never be crossed. Chapter 3. The Child's Truth. The opportunity Ray had been waiting for came the following week when Claire announced she had to fly to Chicago for a real estate conference. Ray verified the story. There was indeed a conference, and Claire's agency had registered her. But given her recent pattern of deception, Ray suspected the trip had more to do with Trevor Ashford than professional development. I'll only be gone 3 days, Claire said, kissing Emma goodbye. Be good for Dad, okay? Emma nodded solemnly. But Ray noticed how she seemed to relax slightly as Claire's car disappeared down the street. For the first 2 days, Ray treated the time like a reconnaissance mission. He observed Emma without pressure, noting how her appetite improved slightly and how she seemed less jumpy around the house. She still wasn't the vibrant child he remembered from their early dating days, but she was marginally more at ease. On the second evening, Ray decided to take a calculated risk. After Emma's bath, he sat on the edge of her bed for their usual bedtime routine. Em, can I ask you something? He said gently. She nodded, clutching her stuffed elephant, a gift he'd given her for her 5th birthday. When you go places with Mom, do you always have fun? Emma's eyes darted away from his face. Sometimes. What about when you visit Mom's friend, the man at the tall building? The reaction was immediate and devastating. Emma's face crumpled, and tears began streaming down her cheeks. I don't want to go there anymore, Dad, she whispered. But Mom says I have to be quiet about it, or something bad will happen to you. Ray felt his heart shatter and his rage ignite simultaneously. He kept his voice gentle despite the fury building in his chest. Emma, sweetheart, nothing bad is going to happen to me. I'm a police officer, remember? It's my job to keep people safe. That includes you. But Mom said, what did Mom say exactly? Emma was sobbing now, her small body shaking with the weight of secrets she'd been forced to carry. She said the man doesn't like policemen, and if I told you about visiting him, he might hurt you. She said some men are dangerous when they get angry. Ray's vision went red for a moment. Claire had been using his own profession, his dedication to protecting others, as a weapon to silence Emma. She'd terrorized a 5-year-old into keeping secrets that were clearly causing the child distress. Emma, listen to me very carefully, Ray said, taking her small hands in his. No one is going to hurt me. And more importantly, no one is going to hurt you. I promise you that. But I don't like going there, Dad. The man is mean, and he says things that make Mom upset. And sometimes, Emma's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Sometimes he gets really angry and throws things. Ray's hands clenched involuntarily, but he forced himself to remain calm. Has he ever thrown things at you or Mom? Not at me. But one time he threw a bottle and it broke near Mom's feet. There was glass everywhere. Mom told me to hide in the bathroom until he calmed down. The pieces were falling into place, painting a picture that made Ray want to drive to Trevor Ashford's apartment and end this immediately. But he needed the full truth first. Emma, has anyone ever touched you in a way that made you uncomfortable? Or asked you to keep secrets about touching? No, Emma said quickly, and Ray believed her. But I heard Mom crying once, and when I asked her why, she said adults sometimes have to do things they don't want to do. Ray felt something cold and final settle in his chest. Claire wasn't just having an affair. She was subjecting herself and Emma to an abusive situation. Whether she was being coerced or had simply gotten in over her head with a dangerous man, the result was the same. Emma was being traumatized, and Claire was using threats to ensure the child's silence. Dad, Emma said suddenly, I need to tell you something. What is it, sweetheart? The man, he said something about you. He said you think you're so tough because you're a cop, but that cops can be hurt just like anyone else. He said it while he was looking at pictures on Mom's phone. Pictures of you. Ray's blood turned to ice. Trevor Ashford wasn't just Claire's affair partner. He was actively targeting Ray. This wasn't a simple case of infidelity. It was something far more dangerous. Emma, this is very important. When did he say this? Last week, when Mom took me there while you were at work. He was looking at pictures of you in your uniform, and he said other things too. Bad words I'm not supposed to say. Ray stood up abruptly, his mind racing. Trevor Ashford had his personal information, photos of him in uniform, and had made threats. Combined with his previous assault conviction, this painted the picture of someone potentially planning violence against a police officer. Emma, I want you to listen to me very carefully, Ray said, kneeling back down to her level. You did exactly the right thing by telling me this. You're very brave, and I'm proud of you. Am I in trouble? No, baby. You're not in trouble at all. But I need to make some phone calls tonight to make sure everyone stays safe. Can you do me a favor and not tell Mom about our conversation when she comes home? Emma nodded, and Ray could see the relief in her eyes. The burden of keeping adult secrets was finally being lifted from her small shoulders. After Emma fell asleep, Ray sat in his home office and began making calls. First to his partner Luis, then to his lieutenant, and finally to a contact in the FBI who specialized in threats against law enforcement. By morning, Ray had a comprehensive plan in place. Trevor Ashford had made a critical mistake by threatening a police officer and involving a child in his schemes. What he'd intended as intimidation would become the foundation of his own destruction. Ray Morrison had spent his career putting dangerous men in cages. Now it was time to add another name to that list. But this time it was personal. This time, Ray wouldn't stop at an arrest and conviction. Trevor Ashford and Claire had traumatized Emma, threatened his family, and violated every trust they'd been given. They were about to learn that some men don't just seek justice, they become it. Chapter 4, The Investigation. Ray spent the next morning implementing a plan that would have made his narcotics division proud. Using his police connections and 15 years of investigative experience, he began building a comprehensive file on Trevor Ashford that went far beyond what a simple background check would reveal. His first call was to Detective Maria Rodriguez in the Domestic Violence Unit. Maria owed Ray a favor from a case where he'd helped her locate a suspect who'd been terrorizing his ex-wife. I need everything you can find on a Trevor Ashford, age 36, lives at Harbor View Apartments in Yonkers, Ray said, keeping his voice professional despite the personal nature of his request. This official business, Morrison? Let's call it proactive policing. I have reason to believe he might be involved in intimidating a law enforcement officer. That was all Maria needed to hear. Threats against cops were taken seriously by every department, and she promised to have a full workup by the end of the day. Ray's second call was to his contact at the phone company. Claire's call logs had shown the frequency of her communication with Trevor, but Ray needed location data and text message records. With a potential threat against an officer as justification, the warrant would be expedited. While waiting for those results, Ray decided to do some old-fashioned surveillance. He called in sick, something he hadn't done in 3 years, and positioned himself across from Harborview Apartments. What he observed over the next 6 hours confirmed his worst suspicions. Trevor Ashford was a man with a violent temper and no regard for others. Ray watched him verbally assault a delivery driver over a parking dispute, saw him kick a neighbor's dog for barking, and witnessed him throw a beer bottle at a group of teenagers who were skateboarding in the parking lot. But the most revealing moment came when a woman in her 30s arrived at the complex around 2 p.m. Ray recognized her from social media photos as Amanda Pierce, Trevor's ex-girlfriend. What happened next made Ray reach for his service weapon. The argument started in the parking lot and quickly escalated. Trevor grabbed Amanda's arm hard enough to leave marks, shook her violently, and then shoved her against her car. Ray was about to intervene when Amanda broke free and drove away, tears streaming down her face. Ray followed Amanda to a nearby coffee shop and approached her carefully. After identifying himself as a police officer, he explained that he'd witnessed the altercation and was concerned for her safety. "He's been like this for months," Amanda said, her voice shaking. "Getting worse and worse. I finally left him 2 weeks ago, but he won't leave me alone." "Has he ever threatened you specifically?" "Every day. He says if he can't have me, no one can. He's also been talking about some cop whose wife he's been sleeping with. Says he's going to show the cop what real power looks like." Ray felt his jaw clench. Did he mention the officer's name? "Morrison, I think. He's obsessed with proving he's tougher than some detective. It's sick, really. He's using that poor woman to get to her husband." The pieces were falling into place with crystal clarity. Trevor wasn't just having an affair with Claire. He was using her as a weapon against Ray. The relationship was part of a deliberate campaign to hurt and humiliate a police officer who had likely never even met him. "Amanda, I need you to file a formal complaint about the harassment and threats. Would you be willing to do that? Will it actually help? Or will it just make him angrier?" Ray met her eyes with the cold certainty of a man who'd made his decision. "I can guarantee you that Trevor Ashford will not be a problem for much longer." After taking Amanda's statement and ensuring she had Ray's direct number, he returned to his surveillance position. His phone buzzed with a text from Maria Rodriguez. "Call me ASAP. You're not going to believe what I found." Ray drove to a secluded parking lot and called Maria back. "Morrison, your boy Trevor Ashford is a piece of work. 3 domestic violence arrests in the past 5 years, but the charges were dropped each time because the women recanted their statements. Intimidation? Most likely. But here's the interesting part. I talked to one of the victims off the record. She says Trevor has a thing about cops. Apparently, his father was a police officer who abandoned the family when Trevor was young. Classic psychological profile of someone with authority issues." Ray felt a grim satisfaction. Trevor's targeting of him wasn't random. It was psychological warfare based on deep-seated father issues. "There's more," Maria continued. "I ran his financials. Trevor's been making a lot more money than his contractor business should generate. We're talking high-end purchases, luxury apartment rent, expensive gifts. Either he's the most successful handyman in New York, or he's got income he's not reporting. Drug dealing? That's what I'm thinking. And Morrison? If this guy is dealing and threatening cops, that makes him a federal problem. The FBI would love to take a crack at him." Ray thanked Maria and ended the call, his mind already moving to the next phase of his plan. Trevor Ashford wasn't just an abusive boyfriend or a homewrecker. He was a criminal who had made the fatal mistake of targeting the wrong cop's family. That evening, Ray received a call from Claire. "Hi, honey. How are things going with Emma?" "Fine," Ray said, keeping his voice neutral. "She's been asking about you." "That's sweet. Listen, the conference has been extended through tomorrow. One of the speakers canceled, so they've rearranged the schedule. I won't be home until late Friday night." Ray knew she was lying. There was no extended conference. He'd checked. Claire was spending an extra day with Trevor, probably thinking she was being clever about managing her double life. "That's too bad," Ray said. "Emma will be disappointed." "I know, but this is important for my career. You understand, right?" "Of course," Ray replied. "Take all the time you need." After hanging up, Ray looked at Emma, who was coloring at the kitchen table. She seemed lighter somehow, more like the child he remembered from before their world had become complicated. "Hey, Em," he said gently. "How would you like to spend tomorrow at work with Dad? I'll show you the police station." Emma's face lit up with genuine excitement for the first time in weeks. "Really? Can I see your badge and everything?" "Absolutely." And Em, after tomorrow, things are going to be different around here. Better different. Ray had one more day to finalize his plans. One more day before Claire returned and the real game began. Trevor Ashford had wanted to play with the cop's family, had wanted to prove his dominance over someone he saw as an authority figure. Tomorrow, Ray would show him exactly what kind of man he'd chosen to cross. Chapter 5. The Setup. Ray brought Emma to the precinct the next morning, introducing her to his colleagues and letting her explore the detective division under careful supervision. She was fascinated by everything: the computers, the evidence boards, the holding cells, and for the first time in weeks, she seemed like a normal, curious 5-year-old. While Emma was distracted by Detective Santos teaching her how to use the fingerprint scanner, Ray put the final pieces of his plan into motion. The warrant for Trevor's phone records had come through overnight, and the contents were explosive. Text messages between Trevor and Claire revealed the depth of their relationship, and, more importantly, Trevor's escalating threats toward Ray. "Your husband thinks he's so tough," one message read. "Wait until he finds out what's been happening in his own house." Another message was even more damning. "I'm going to destroy that cop's life piece by piece, starting with his precious little family." But the most chilling discovery was a series of photos Trevor had taken outside Ray's workplace, their home, and Emma's school. He'd been stalking the family for weeks, documenting their routines and gathering intelligence like he was planning an operation. Ray forwarded everything to FBI agent Sarah Chun, who specialized in crimes against law enforcement. Within 2 hours, she called him back. "Morrison, this is federal territory now. We're opening an investigation into Trevor Ashford for stalking a federal officer and conspiracy to commit crimes against a law enforcement family. What's the timeline? We can have surveillance in place by this afternoon and an arrest warrant by tomorrow morning." "But Morrison," Agent Chin paused, "we're also going to need to interview your wife. Her involvement in this situation is concerning." Ray had been expecting this. Claire's role in Trevor's campaign against him made her either a victim or a co-conspirator, and the evidence was starting to suggest the latter. "I understand. She'll be back in town tonight. We'll need her phone and laptop for analysis. If she's been knowingly participating in threats against you, she could face charges as well." Ray felt a cold satisfaction settle in his chest. Claire had made her choices, and now she would face the consequences. After lunch, Ray took Emma home and sat her down for a serious conversation. "Em, tomorrow some of my friends from work are going to come to the house to talk to Mom. They might ask you some questions too, just to make sure everyone is safe." "Am I in trouble?" "No, sweetheart. You're the hero in this story. You told me the truth when it was scary, and that's going to help keep everyone safe." "What about Mom?" Ray chose his words carefully. "Mom made some bad choices, Em. When adults make bad choices, sometimes there are consequences. But I want you to know that no matter what happens, you'll always be safe and loved." Emma nodded solemnly, and Ray could see the intelligence in her green eyes. She understood more than most adults gave her credit for. That evening, Claire returned home with a kind of forced cheerfulness that immediately put Ray on alert. "I miss you both so much," she announced, hugging Emma and kissing Ray on the cheek. "The conference was amazing, but there's nothing like being home." Ray watched her performance with the detached observation of a detective studying a suspect. Every gesture seemed calculated, every word chosen for maximum effect. "How was Chicago?" he asked casually. "Oh, you know how these things are. Lots of networking, boring presentations. But I made some good connections for the agency." Ray nodded, knowing that Claire hadn't been to Chicago at all. Phone records showed her device had never left the New York area. "That's great, honey. I'm sure it'll pay off." During dinner, Claire seemed nervous, constantly checking her phone and jumping at small sounds. When Emma accidentally dropped her fork, Claire nearly spilled her wine. "Everything okay?" Ray asked. "Just tired from traveling. You know how airports can be." After putting Emma to bed, Claire immediately headed for the shower. While the water was running, Ray checked her purse and found a receipt from a restaurant in Yonkers dated the previous evening. Further confirmation that her Chicago story was fabricated. When Claire emerged from the bathroom, Ray was sitting on their bed with his hands folded. "Claire, we need to talk." She froze for a moment, then forced a smile. Of course. What's on your mind? I know about Trevor. The blood drained from Claire's face. For several seconds, she stood perfectly still, like a deer caught in headlights. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. Ray's voice was quiet but filled with absolute certainty. I know about the apartment. I know about the lies. I know about the threats he's been making toward me and this family. Claire's mask finally slipped completely. She sank into the chair by their window, her hands shaking. Ray, I can explain. Can you? Can you explain why you've been using our daughter as cover for your affair? Can you explain why you've been helping a man stalk me and threaten my family? It's not like that. Claire's voice was desperate now. Trevor, he's not what I thought he was. I tried to end it, but he said he'd hurt you if I left him. He said he'd make Emma disappear. Ray studied his wife's face, looking for truth among the lies. When did you realize what kind of man he really was? Weeks ago, maybe months. But every time I tried to break it off, he'd show me pictures of you at work or photos of Emma at school. He said he could get to any of us whenever he wanted. And you thought the solution was to keep seeing him? To keep bringing Emma around him? Claire was crying now, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. I didn't know what else to do. He said if I told you, he'd kill you. He has friends, Ray. Dangerous people. Ray felt a mixture of anger and pity. Claire had made terrible choices, but Trevor Ashford was a master manipulator who specialized in psychological control. Claire, tomorrow morning the FBI is going to arrest Trevor. They're also going to want to talk to you about your involvement in this situation. The FBI? Claire's face went white. Trevor made the mistake of threatening a police officer and stalking a federal agent's family. That's a federal crime. What's going to happen to me? Ray looked at his wife, the woman he'd loved, who had betrayed him and endangered Emma, and felt nothing but cold resolve. That depends on how much you cooperate with the investigation. And Claire? It depends on how much of this was fear and how much was choice. Claire spent the night on the couch, and Ray lay awake staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow would bring justice for Trevor Ashford and consequences for Claire. But Ray's real work, his true revenge, was just beginning. Some people thought justice ended with arrests and convictions. Ray Morrison knew better. Real justice was comprehensive, personal, and permanent. Trevor Ashford and Claire were about to learn that truth the hard way. Chapter 6. The Arrest. Ray woke before dawn, his internal clock calibrated by years of early morning raids and surveillance operations. He made coffee, checked his weapon, and reviewed the final details of the operation that would begin in 3 hours. Agent Chun had assembled a team that included FBI tactical specialists, local SWAT, and detectives from the Domestic Violence Unit. Trevor Ashford will be taken into custody on federal charges of stalking a law enforcement officer, making threats against a federal agent, and conspiracy to commit violence against a law enforcement family. But Ray's personal investigation had uncovered something even more valuable than federal charges. Trevor's financial records, combined with surveillance footage from a traffic camera near Harborview Apartments, had connected him to a drug distribution network that the DEA had been investigating for 8 months. Trevor Ashford wasn't just a violent manipulator. He was a mid-level drug dealer with ties to organized crime. That discovery would make his arrest significantly more consequential and his eventual sentence much longer. Ray kissed Emma goodbye as she left for school, watched Claire's nervous performance over breakfast, and then called his lieutenant to confirm he'd be late for his shift. At 7:30 a.m., Ray's phone buzzed with a text from Agent Chun. Target confirmed at location. Moving in 5 minutes. Ray drove to a position 3 blocks from Harborview Apartments and waited. He wanted to be close enough to see justice delivered, but far enough away to maintain plausible deniability about his personal involvement. At 7:47 a.m., he watched federal agents and SWAT officers enter the building. 6 minutes later, Trevor Ashford was escorted out in handcuffs, shouting threats and profanities that could be heard from 2 blocks away. Ray felt a cold satisfaction watching the man who had terrorized his family being loaded into a federal transport van. But this arrest was only the beginning of Trevor's problems. After the arrest, Ray returned home to find Claire pacing frantically in their living room, her phone pressed to her ear. He's not answering, she said when she saw Ray. Something's wrong. Trevor was arrested this morning on federal charges, Ray said calmly. The FBI will want to speak with you this afternoon. Claire collapsed onto their couch, her face pale and her hands shaking. Ray, you have to understand, I never wanted any of this. I was trapped. Were you? Or did you make a choice to have an affair and then make additional choices to cover it up? It started innocently. Trevor was charming, attentive. You were working so many long hours, and I felt lonely. Ray sat across from his wife, studying her with the same cold analysis he brought to interrogating suspects. When did it stop being innocent, Claire? Why try to end it the first time? Trevor said he'd been watching you, learning your routines. He showed me photos of you leaving the precinct, pictures of Emma at school. He said cops die in the line of duty all the time, and accidents could be arranged. And your solution was to keep seeing him? I thought if I gave him what he wanted, he'd eventually lose interest and move on to someone else. Ray shook his head. Claire, you brought Emma into this. You used our daughter as cover for your affair and exposed her to a dangerous criminal. Claire was sobbing now, her carefully maintained composure completely shattered. I know it was wrong, but I was scared, Ray. I was terrified of what he might do to you, to Emma, to all of us. Ray felt a flicker of sympathy, but it was quickly overwhelmed by anger at the choices Claire had made. Fear might explain her initial compliance, but it didn't excuse months of deception and the trauma inflicted on Emma. The FBI will want to know everything, Ray said. Your cooperation will determine whether you face charges as an accessory. What kind of charges? Conspiracy to stalk a federal agent. Accessory to making threats against a law enforcement officer. Child endangerment. Ray's voice was clinical, professional. Trevor's phone records show you providing him with my schedule, information about Emma's school, details about our home security. Claire's face went white. I didn't know he was going to use it to hurt you. He said he just wanted to understand your life, so he could avoid causing problems. And you believe that? I wanted to believe it. I was desperate to find a way out that didn't end with someone getting hurt. At 2 p.m., Agent Chun arrived with 2 other federal agents and a detective from the district attorney's office. Ray watched from the kitchen as they interviewed Claire in their living room, documenting her involvement in Trevor's campaign against their family. The interview lasted 3 hours. When it was over, Agent Chun approached Ray privately. Your wife's cooperation has been valuable, she said. Trevor Ashford is looking at serious federal time. Minimum 15 years, possibly 25 with the drug charges. As for Claire, what's the recommendation? House arrest, pending trial. Then probation with mandatory counseling. The prosecutor is willing to consider a plea agreement in exchange for her testimony against Ashford. Ray nodded. It was better than Claire deserved, but it served justice and protected Emma from further trauma. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Ray sat with Claire in their living room for what he knew would be their final conversation as husband and wife. What happens now? Claire asked. Now you face the consequences of your choices, Ray said quietly. The federal charges, the divorce proceedings, the custody evaluation. Ray, please. I know I made terrible mistakes, but nothing. Ray's voice cut through her plea with absolute finality. You betrayed our marriage, endangered our daughter, and helped a criminal target my family. There are consequences for those actions. I was scared. So was Emma. Every night for months, that little girl was scared because of choices you made. She lost weight, couldn't sleep, and had to keep adult secrets that no child should carry. Claire was crying again, but Ray felt no sympathy. He'd spent his career seeing the damage that selfish choices inflicted on innocent people, and he'd never been more certain that justice required accountability. I'll fight for full custody of Emma, Ray continued. I'll ensure Trevor Ashford serves every day of his sentence. And Claire? I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who you really are. Ray Morrison was a man who believed in consequences. Tomorrow, he would begin the process of rebuilding Emma's life and securing her future. Claire would face trial, probation, and the permanent consequences of her betrayal. Trevor Ashford would spend the next 2 decades in federal prison, where men who threatened law enforcement families received special attention from other inmates. Justice, Ray had learned, wasn't just about punishment. It was about ensuring that the innocent were protected and the guilty faced the full weight of their choices. Some people called it revenge. Ray called it responsibility. Chapter 7, The Reckoning. 3 months after Trevor's arrest, Ray sat in family court listening to Claire's attorney make a desperate plea for shared custody. The lawyer painted a picture of a woman who had made mistakes under duress, a mother who deserved a chance to rebuild her relationship with her daughter. Ray's attorney, Amanda Walsh, a formidable woman known for her aggressive tactics in high-stakes custody cases, had prepared a different narrative entirely. "Your Honor," Amanda said, rising to address the judge, "the evidence shows a pattern of deliberate choices that endangered a 5-year-old child. Mrs. Morrison didn't just have an affair, she actively participated in a criminal conspiracy that targeted her own family." The evidence Amanda presented was devastating. Phone records showing Claire had provided Trevor with Ray's work schedule. Text messages where Claire discussed Ray's weaknesses and how to get under his skin. Photos that Claire had taken of Ray in uniform and sent to Trevor without Ray's knowledge. But the most damaging evidence was Emma's own testimony, given in the judge's chambers with a child psychologist present. Emma described months of being taken to the mean man's house, being told to lie to Ray, and being warned that bad things would happen to her father if she told the truth. Judge Patricia Henley had presided over family court for 12 years, and Ray could see the anger in her eyes as she reviewed the case file. "Mrs. Morrison," the judge said, addressing Claire directly, "you used your 5-year-old daughter as an accessory to adultery and criminal conspiracy. You terrorized this child with threats about her stepfather's safety. You coached her to lie to a law enforcement officer who was trying to protect his family." Claire's attorney attempted to interject, but Judge Henley continued. "Furthermore, your cooperation with federal authorities appears to have been motivated by a self-preservation rather than genuine remorse. The psychological evaluation indicates you show minimal empathy for the trauma inflicted on your daughter." Ray watched Claire's face as the judge delivered her ruling. He felt no satisfaction in her devastation, only a cold certainty that justice was being served. "Full custody is awarded to Detective Morrison," Judge Henley announced. "Mrs. Morrison will have supervised visitation rights 1 day per month, contingent upon completion of mandatory psychological counseling and parenting classes." Claire's attorney immediately filed an appeal, but Ray knew it would fail. The evidence was too comprehensive, Emma's trauma too well documented. After the custody hearing, Ray took Emma out for ice cream to celebrate. She seemed lighter somehow, as if the official recognition of her father's protection had lifted a weight she'd been carrying for months. "Dad," Emma said as they sat in their favorite booth at Murphy's Diner, "are you going to get married again?" "I don't know, sweetheart. Would that bother you?" Emma considered this seriously, the way she approached all important questions. "Only if she's mean to you, or if she lies." Ray smiled at his daughter's simple wisdom. "Well, if I ever date anyone again, you'll be the first to meet her. And if you don't like her, that's it. No second dates. Promise. Promise." But Ray's focus wasn't on future relationships. It was on ensuring that Trevor Ashford and Claire faced complete consequences for their actions. Trevor's trial was scheduled for the following month, and Ray had been working behind the scenes to ensure the prosecution had everything they needed for a conviction. Trevor's public defender had attempted to negotiate a plea deal, but Ray had used his connections to ensure the prosecutor understood the full scope of Trevor's crimes. The stalking charges were just the beginning. Trevor was also facing federal drug trafficking charges, assault charges from his ex-girlfriend Amanda, and additional counts related to threatening a law enforcement family. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Ray testified about finding the evidence of stalking and threats. Amanda testified about Trevor's pattern of violence and control. Claire, honoring her plea agreement, testified about Trevor's escalating threats and his obsession with humiliating Ray. But the most powerful testimony came from an unexpected source, Trevor's former associate in the drug trafficking operation. Marcus Fleming, facing his own federal charges, described Trevor's detailed plans to destroy that cop's life and his boast about using Claire to gather intelligence on Ray's vulnerabilities. Trevor was obsessed. Marcus testified. He said cops thought they were untouchable, and he was going to prove them wrong. He talked about the detective's wife and kid like they were chess pieces in some sick game. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Trevor Ashford was found guilty on all federal charges and sentenced to 28 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. Ray attended the sentencing hearing and watched Trevor's face as Judge Michael Torres delivered the verdict. For the first time since this ordeal began, Trevor's arrogant smirk was gone, replaced by the hollow expression of a man who finally understood the consequences of his choices. "Mr. Ashford," Judge Torres said, "you targeted a law enforcement family with a deliberate intent to cause psychological and physical harm. You used manipulation and violence to control multiple victims. You showed no remorse for your actions and no consideration for the innocent child caught in your web of criminal behavior." Trevor's attorney attempted to argue for a reduced sentence, but Judge Torres was unmoved. "This court finds that Mr. Ashford represents a clear and ongoing danger to society, particularly to law enforcement personnel and their families. The maximum sentence is not only appropriate, but necessary to protect potential future victims." After the sentencing, Ray walked to his car with a sense of completion that he rarely felt after closing a case. Trevor Ashford would spend the rest of his productive life in federal prison, where his threats against law enforcement would make him a target for other inmates who wanted to curry favor with guards. Claire's criminal trial was scheduled for the following month, but her plea agreement would likely result in probation and community service. Ray had ensured that her real punishment would be social and professional. Word of her involvement in threatening a police family had spread through her real estate agency and their social circle. But Ray's most important victory was simpler and more profound. Emma was safe, happy, and healing. She was seeing a child psychologist who specialized in trauma recovery, and her nightmares had stopped. She was eating normally again, laughing at appropriate times, and trusting Ray to protect her. Ray Morrison was a man who believed in justice, and justice had been served. Trevor Ashford and Claire had learned that some people should never be crossed, and some betrayals carried permanent consequences. The innocent had been protected. The guilty had been punished. Ray could sleep soundly knowing that his family was safe and his enemies were neutralized. Some people called it revenge. Ray called it responsibility, the obligation of strong men to protect those who couldn't protect themselves and to ensure that evil faced consequences. Chapter 8. The New Beginning. 6 months after Trevor's sentencing, Ray and Emma had settled into a new routine that felt more natural and peaceful than anything they'd experienced during the marriage to Claire. Emma was thriving in her new school. Ray had moved them to a house in a different district to create physical and psychological distance from their previous life. The new house was smaller, but felt more like home. Emma had helped pick out the paint colors for her room, and Ray had taught her to use basic tools so she could help with simple repairs. They cooked dinner together most nights, did homework at the kitchen table, and established bedtime routines that included both story time and honest conversations about their day. Dr. Sarah Martinez, Emma's therapist, had declared Emma's recovery remarkable and reduced their sessions to once monthly. Emma was sleeping through the night, her appetite had returned to normal, and she was making friends at her new school. "She's resilient," Dr. Martinez told Ray during one of their parent consultation sessions. "Children who have a strong, consistent adult in their life can recover from trauma much more effectively than those who don't. You've given her the security she needed to heal." Ray felt a quiet pride in Emma's recovery, but he also knew their work wasn't finished. Claire's monthly supervised visits were awkward affairs that left Emma confused and sometimes sad, but Dr. Martinez encouraged them to continue as long as Emma wasn't regressing. "She needs to understand that her mother's choices weren't her fault," Dr. Martinez explained. "And she needs to see that you're not preventing a relationship. You're just ensuring it's safe." The visits took place at a family services center under the supervision of a social worker. Claire brought gifts and made promises about future activities, but Emma remained politely distant. She'd grown wise beyond her years about the difference between words and actions. Ray's professional life had also evolved. His work on the Trevor Ashford case had earned him recognition from the FBI, and he'd been offered a position with a joint task force investigating crimes against law enforcement families. The job paid better, offered more regular hours, and allowed him to use his experience to help other families facing similar threats. His new partner, Detective Lisa Chun, Agent Chen's sister, coincidentally, was a former military investigator who brought a different perspective to their cases. She was also a single parent, which gave them common ground beyond their professional partnership. You know, Lisa said one afternoon as they reviewed case files, Emma's going to start asking questions about dating eventually. Have you thought about what you'll tell her? Ray had thought about it, actually. Emma was 8 now, mature for her age, and increasingly aware of family dynamics among her friends. I told her she gets veto power over anyone I might date seriously, Ray said. If she doesn't like them, that's it. Lisa laughed. That's either very wise or very limiting, depending on an 8-year-old's taste in women. Ray smiled. Emma's a good judge of character. She saw through Claire's act before I did. Speaking of Claire, how are those visits going? There. Ray paused, considering how to describe the uncomfortable monthly encounters. Necessary, I think. Emma needs to see that I'm not the one preventing a relationship. She needs to understand that some people just aren't capable of being good parents. Claire's life had indeed unraveled completely. Her real estate license had been suspended pending the outcome of her criminal case. Her social circle had ostracized her after learning about her involvement in threatening a police family. She'd moved back in with her parents in Ohio and was working at a call center while attending court-mandated counseling. Ray felt no satisfaction in Claire's downfall, but he felt no sympathy either. She'd made choices that endangered Emma, and consequences were the natural result of those choices. Trevor's situation was different. Ray received regular updates on Trevor's status in federal prison, and the reports confirmed his expectations. Trevor had been classified as a high-risk inmate due to his threats against law enforcement, which meant he spent most of his time in protective custody. But even protective custody couldn't shield him from the consequences of his actions. Other inmates who wanted to curry favor with guards, many of whom were former police officers, made Trevor's life miserable. He'd been assaulted twice, had his commissary privileges revoked multiple times, and was serving additional time in solitary confinement for various infractions. Ray had also used his connections to ensure that Trevor's parole hearing, scheduled for 15 years in the future, would be well documented with victim impact statements and detailed accounts of his crimes. Trevor Ashford would serve every day of his sentence. But Ray's focus had shifted from revenge to rebuilding. Emma was his priority now, and everything else was secondary. One evening, as they worked on Emma's science project about solar systems, she asked a question that caught Ray off guard. Dad, do you think Mom loved me? Ray set down the paintbrush he'd been using to help Emma color Jupiter and considered his answer carefully. I think Mom loved the idea of you, he said finally. But love means protecting people, even when it's hard. Love means telling the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Love means putting someone else's needs before your own. Emma nodded solemnly. Like how you protect me? Exactly like that. Real love is about actions, not words. Do you think she'll ever learn how to love people the right way? Ray looked at his daughter, wise, resilient, and thoughtful, and felt a surge of pride and protectiveness. I don't know, but it doesn't matter what Mom learns or doesn't learn. What matters is that you know what real love looks like, so you can recognize it in other people and give it to the people who deserve it. Emma smiled and returned to painting Jupiter. I think I already know what real love looks like. Ray Morrison had spent most of his adult life seeking justice for victims and consequences for criminals. But sitting at his kitchen table, helping his daughter with homework in a house they'd chosen together, he realized he'd found something more valuable than revenge. He'd found redemption, not for himself, but for Emma. He'd taken a traumatized child and given her security, honesty, and unconditional love. He'd shown her that some people could be trusted to keep their promises and protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Some victories were measured in arrests and convictions. Others were measured in a child's laughter and peaceful sleep. Ray had achieved both, and that was justice enough. Chapter 9. Full Circle. 2 years later, Ray stood in the back of Emma's school auditorium watching her perform in the fifth-grade production of Annie. She played one of the orphans, and her clear voice rang out during the ensemble numbers with a confidence that still amazed him. After the performance, Emma ran to him with her face glowing with excitement. "Did you see me, Dad? Did I do okay?" "You were perfect," Ray said, lifting her up despite her protest that she was too old for that. "I'm so proud of you." As they walked to the car, Emma chattered about the other kids in the play, her upcoming science fair project, and her plans for the weekend. Ray listened with the contentment of a man who had fought for something precious and won. Dr. Martinez had officially concluded Emma's therapy 6 months earlier, declaring her a well-adjusted, resilient child with strong attachment bonds and excellent coping mechanisms. Emma still had monthly check-ins with the school counselor, but her trauma responses had virtually disappeared. Ray's own life had found a stable rhythm. His work with the task force was challenging but rewarding, and he developed a reputation as someone who could be trusted with sensitive cases involving law enforcement families. The irregular hours that had contributed to his marriage problems with Claire were now manageable, and he rarely worked weekends. Lisa Chun had become more than just a professional partner. Their friendship had evolved slowly and carefully, with Emma's approval at every step. Lisa understood the demands of single parenthood and the complexities of Ray's situation, as she'd never pushed for more than he was ready to give. "You know," Lisa had said recently, "Emma's been dropping some pretty heavy hints about me staying for dinner more often." Ray had laughed. "She's not exactly subtle, is she?" "Not even a little bit. Yesterday she told me I should teach her to braid hair because dads aren't good at girl stuff, and it would be nice to have someone who understands." Ray appreciated Lisa's patience with Emma's not-so-subtle matchmaking attempts. Emma had decided that Lisa was acceptable girlfriend material and had launched a campaign to encourage their relationship. Claire's monthly visits had dwindled to quarterly visits and then stopped altogether 8 months ago. She'd moved to California with a new boyfriend and had essentially abandoned her parental rights without formally relinquishing them. Emma had stopped asking about her mother and seemed relieved when the awkward visits ended. "I think she just wasn't meant to be a mom," Emma had said with the matter-of-fact wisdom of a 10-year-old. "Some people aren't good at important things." Ray had agreed and privately filed the paperwork to terminate Claire's parental rights due to abandonment. Emma deserved the security of knowing where she stood, and Ray deserved the legal protection of being her sole guardian. Trevor Ashford remained in federal prison with no possibility of parole for another 13 years. Ray received quarterly updates on his status, and the reports consistently showed a man who was broken by his circumstances. Trevor had been attacked multiple times by other inmates, had attempted suicide twice, and was currently serving additional time in solitary confinement for threatening a guard. Ray felt no satisfaction in Trevor's suffering, but he felt no sympathy either. Trevor had chosen to target an innocent family, and prison was simply the natural consequence of that choice. The real measure of Ray's success wasn't Trevor's misery or Claire's abandonment. It was Emma's thriving independence and growing confidence. She was an honor roll student, played soccer on the school team, and had a close circle of friends who often gathered at their house for study sessions and movie nights. "Dad," Emma said as they drove home from the play, "can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you think you'll ever get married again?" Ray glanced at his daughter in the rearview mirror. "Would you want me to?" "Only if it's Lisa," Emma said firmly. "She's the only one who passes my tests." "What tests?" "She doesn't lie to you. She doesn't try to change you. She likes spending time with us, even when we're boring. And she laughs at your dumb jokes, even though they're not funny." Ray couldn't help but smile. "Those are good tests. So, are you going to ask her?" "Emma, relationships are complicated." "Dad," Emma's voice carried the exasperated tone of a child who thought adults were unnecessarily dense. "She brings you coffee the way you like it without being asked. She helped me with my math homework, even though it's not her job. She worries about you when you work late cases. She's already part of our family. You just need to make it official." Ray Morrison had faced down armed criminals, survived 3 officer-involved shootings, and successfully prosecuted some of the most dangerous men in New York. But his 10-year-old daughter's relationship advice made him nervous. I'll think about it, he said. Think fast, Emma replied. Good women don't wait around forever for scared men to figure out obvious things. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Ray sat on his back porch with a beer and considered his daughter's wisdom. Emma was right. Lisa had become part of their family through her actions, her consistency, and her genuine care for both of them. Ray had learned the hard way that trust was earned through daily choices, not grand gestures. Lisa had been earning his trust for 2 years, and Emma's trust even longer. Ray Morrison was a man who believed in consequences, both negative and positive. Claire and Trevor had faced the consequences of their betrayals. Emma had experienced the positive consequences of being protected and valued. Maybe it was time for Ray to embrace the positive consequences of letting someone trustworthy into his carefully guarded world. His phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. Emma was amazing tonight. You should be proud. Ray smiled and typed back. Dinner tomorrow? I'll cook. I'll bring dessert. Lisa replied immediately. Ray Morrison had spent years ensuring that bad people faced consequences for their actions. Now, surrounded by the quiet contentment of his rebuilt life, he was ready to embrace the consequences of choosing good people and treating them well. Some stories ended with revenge. Others ended with redemption. Ray had achieved both, and that was justice enough for any man. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Marcus Bryant stood in the workshop at 2 a.m., his hand steady as he welded the final joint on a custom steel railing. The orange sparks illuminated his face, highlighting the dark circles under his eyes. He hadn't slept properly in weeks, but tonight was different. Tonight, he worked because he wanted to, not because he was avoiding home. There was no home to avoid anymore. The divorce papers had been served 3 months ago, and today, technically was the final hearing. Melissa wanted everything. Not half. Everything. The business, the house, the savings, even his late father's workshop tools. Her lawyer, Carlton Simmons, had filed papers claiming Marcus had contributed nothing of value to the marriage or the business. That Marcus' steel and design was built on family money, her family's money. It was an impressive lie. Marcus removed his welding helmet and examined the railing. Perfect as always. He'd started this business 8 years ago with $3,000, a rented garage, and skills his father taught him before cancer took him. Every piece of equipment, every contract, every dollar he'd earned it with his hands and his mind. He thought back to how it started. Fresh out of a technical college, working 3 jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night. He'd met Melissa Davidson back then at a gallery opening where his first major piece was displayed. A sculptural staircase that had taken him 6 months to design and build. She'd been charming, interested in his work, supportive of his dreams. Or so he'd thought. Marcus always had such wonderful dreams, she'd told friends at their wedding. I can't wait to help him achieve them. She'd helped, in her way. Melissa had a business degree and offered to handle the administrative side while he focused on design and fabrication. It seemed perfect. He'd given her access to accounts, made her a partner on paper, trusted her with everything. The betrayal hadn't been sudden. Looking back, Marcus could see the signs he'd missed. Small things at first: Melissa questioning his decisions, suggesting they hire managers, pushing him to step back from the creative process. Her mother, Gloria Davidson, had moved to town 2 years into the marriage, and that's when things truly shifted. Gloria was old money, or at least she acted like it. Her family had owned a successful textile business decades ago, sold it before the industry collapsed. She'd lived off that money ever since, never working a day, and she'd raised Melissa with the same entitled expectations. To Gloria, Marcus was beneath her daughter, a craftsman, a manual laborer who got his hands dirty. Melissa could have married Benjamin Lowe, Gloria had said once, not bothering to lower her voice at a family dinner. A lawyer from a good family. Instead, she's watching her husband play with metal in a garage. Marcus had ignored it then. He'd ignored a lot of things. The real problem started 18 months ago. Melissa had come home from lunch with her mother and announced she wanted to rebrand the business. Hire a new designer. Make Marcus just the CEO, the face of the company, who didn't actually create anything anymore. You've taken it as far as you can with your skills, she'd said, her voice sweet with condescension. We need to bring in real talent to reach the next level. Real talent. As if the 50 commission pieces, the features in architectural magazines, the waiting list of clients meant nothing. Marcus had refused. It was his art, his vision, his life's work. The argument had been spectacular. Melissa had cried, accused him of not trusting her business judgment, of being controlling. Gloria had called him ungrateful, reminded him that Melissa had sacrificed her own career to help him. What career? Melissa had worked as an office manager for 6 months before they married. She quit the moment Marcus's business started showing profit. After that fight, Melissa changed. She became cold, calculating. She started documenting everything, taking photos of their home, keeping receipts, building a narrative. Marcus saw it happening but didn't understand why until the divorce papers arrived. The claim was simple and devastating. Melissa had funded the business with her inheritance. Marcus had contributed nothing but basic labor. She deserved the company, the assets, everything. Her lawyer had somehow produced documents showing money transfers, investment records, even contracts with her name listed as primary owner. Marcus's lawyer, Bernard McIntyre, was good but overwhelmed. They've been planning this for a long time, Bernard had said at their first meeting, his weathered face grim. These documents, some of them go back years. Did you sign anything without reading it? Marcus had signed plenty. He'd trusted his wife. That trust now looked like stupidity. The preliminary hearings had been brutal. Carlton Simmons was a shark, expensive, ruthless, and very good at his job. He painted Marcus as a manual laborer who got lucky, a man who couldn't have possibly built a multi-million-dollar business without his wife's financial backing and business acumen. Mr. Bryant is a talented welder, Carlton had said in one hearing, his voice dripping with contempt. But welding and running a company are very different skills. Miss Davidson provided the capital, the business strategy, and the connections that made Marcus steel and design successful. Melissa sat beside her lawyer, nodding with practiced sadness, playing the role of a woman who'd given everything to an ungrateful husband. Gloria sat behind her, eyes sharp with triumph. Marcus had wanted to shout, to rage, to demand they prove any of it, but Bernard had counseled patience. Let them think they're winning, Bernard had said. We'll get our chance. That chance was in 8 hours. Marcus locked up the workshop and drove through empty streets to the small apartment he'd rented after moving out of his house that he'd bought with his own money, though that was apparently up for debate now. He showered, put on the suit Bernard had insisted on, and made coffee he didn't drink. At 5 a.m., his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Good luck today. You'll need it. M. Melissa, still twisting the knife. Marcus deleted the text and picked up the manila envelope sitting on his kitchen table. It was thick, stuffed with documents he'd been compiling for months. Evidence that would change everything. He'd spent the last 3 months doing what he did best, building something carefully, precisely, with perfect attention to detail. But this time, he wasn't building art. He was building a case, a trap. Bernard didn't even know half of what was in this envelope. Marcus had kept it close, worked on it alone, verified every detail. Because if there was one thing 8 years of running a business had taught him, it was this: documentation beats lies. Facts beat fiction, and patience beats panic. Melissa and Gloria thought they'd been clever. They'd forged documents, manipulated records, built a false narrative. They'd assumed Marcus was too trusting, too focused on his work to notice the details. They'd assumed wrong. The courthouse was busy even at 8:30 a.m. Marcus arrived early and found Bernard waiting outside the courtroom, looking nervous. You ready? Bernard asked. More than ready. Marcus patted the envelope. This is everything we need. Marcus, I should review. Trust me, Bernard. I've checked everything twice. They entered the courtroom. Melissa was already there with Carlton and Gloria. Melissa wore a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than Marcus's rent. Her blonde hair styled perfectly, her expression composed. She looked like the victim she was pretending to be. Gloria sat behind her, dressed in black like she was attending a funeral. In a way, she was. Just not Marcus's. When Melissa's eyes met Marcus's, she smiled. Not a warm smile, a satisfied smile. The smile of someone who thought they'd already won. Carlton Simmons approached Bernard. "Counselor, my client is prepared to be generous. Mr. Bryant can keep his tools, and perhaps a small cash settlement. We'll waive alimony claims if he signs the business over cleanly. We'll present our case to the judge," Bernard replied stiffly. "Suit yourself, but you're fighting a losing battle." Carlton's confidence was absolute. Judge Richard Morrison entered, and everyone rose. Morrison was in his early 60s, a no-nonsense jurist with a reputation for fairness and a deep dislike of liars. Marcus had researched him carefully. "Please be seated," Morrison said. "I've reviewed the preliminary findings and both party submissions. This is a final hearing for property division in the divorce of Melissa Davidson Bryant and Marcus Bryant. Miss Davidson's counsel, you may proceed." Carlton stood, straightening his expensive suit. "Your Honor, this case is straightforward. Miss Davidson invested her personal inheritance approximately $200,000 into her husband's business venture. She provided strategic guidance, business connections, and administrative expertise that transformed a small welding operation into Marcus Steel and Design, now valued at approximately $8 million. Mr. Bryant, while talented with his hands, contributed primarily physical labor. The business exists because of Miss Davidson's financial and intellectual contributions. We have extensive documentation proving her investments and ownership stake." He presented a stack of papers to the judge. Contracts, transfer records, investment documents, all carefully forged over the past 2 years. Morrison reviewed them without expression. "Mr. McIntyre?" Bernard stood, less polished but determined. "Your Honor, Mr. Bryant built this business from nothing with his own capital, skill, and vision. The documents presented by opposing counsel are suspect, and we have evidence that contradicts their claims. Mr. Bryant founded Marcus Steel and Design with $3,000 he'd saved from working multiple jobs. Every major piece, every important design, every client relationship, he built it all." "Do you have documentation?" Morrison asked. "Some, Your Honor. But much of the early business was cash-based, and Mr. Bryant admits he was not meticulous about record-keeping in the first years. He trusted his wife to handle administration." Carlton smiled. "And therein lies the problem, Your Honor. Mr. Bryant has no proof of his claims. My client has extensive documentation. The evidence speaks for itself." Morrison looked at Marcus. "Mr. Bryant, did you contribute financially to starting this business?" Marcus stood. "Yes, Your Honor. $3,000 I'd saved, plus I used equipment my father left me when he died. The initial investment was all mine." "Can you prove the $3,000? "I have the withdrawal record from my bank account, dated 8 years ago. But Your Honor, I have something else." Marcus held up the manila envelope. "With your permission, I'd like to submit this evidence." Carlton's smile faltered slightly. "Your Honor, we weren't notified of additional evidence." "It's all legal, Your Honor," Bernard interjected quickly. "Personal records and documentation Mr. Bryant compiled himself. We're happy to have opposing counsel review it." Morrison considered. "Approach the bench." Both lawyers walked forward with Marcus. He handed the envelope to the judge. Morrison opened it, pulled out the first document, and began reading. His eyebrows rose. He read another page, then another. The silence stretched. Marcus watched Melissa's confident expression begin to crack. Gloria leaned forward, whispering to her daughter. Finally, Morrison looked up. "Mr. Simmons, you're going to want to see this." Carlton took the documents, started reading, and his face went pale. He flipped through pages faster, his confidence evaporating with each one. "Your Honor," Carlton said weakly, "I need time to review." "We'll take a 30-minute recess," Morrison said. "All parties remain available. Mr. Simmons, I suggest you consult with your client." His tone made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. Morrison left the bench. Carlton grabbed the documents and rushed to Melissa and Gloria. Marcus watched as Carlton spread papers on their table and began explaining in urgent whispers. Melissa's face went from confident to confused to horrified. Gloria's expression twisted with rage. Their whispered argument grew heated enough that the bailiff glanced their way. Bernard pulled Marcus aside. "What the hell is in there?" Marcus allowed himself a small smile. "The truth." 30 minutes later, they reconvened. Melissa looked shaken. Gloria looked furious. Carlton looked like a man who just realized he'd bet everything on a losing hand. Morrison returned to the bench. "Before we proceed, I want to confirm some facts. Mr. Bryant, you claim you compiled this evidence yourself?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And it's all legally obtained?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Bank records from my own accounts, business documents I retained copies of, communication records from email accounts I controlled, security footage from my workshop which I own, and audio recordings from my home and vehicle which are legal in this state with single-party consent." Melissa's head snapped up. Audio recordings. Marcus saw the moment she understood. Morrison nodded. "Miss Davidson, your attorney has reviewed the evidence. Do you wish to revise any of your claims?" Carlton stood quickly. "Your Honor, my client maintains." "I asked Miss Davidson." Morrison's voice was sharp. Melissa stood slowly. I need to consult with my attorney." "You've had 30 minutes. Yes or no? Do you wish to revise your claims?" The courtroom was silent. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. "No," Melissa finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't." "Very well." Morrison picked up the first document. "Let's begin with this bank record from 8 years ago. Mr. Bryant, this shows a withdrawal of $3,000 from your personal savings account dated June 15th, 8 years ago. The notation says, business startup. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And this next document is your father's will, showing you inherited his workshop equipment, tools, and a small work truck, all of which you used to start your business. Correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." Morrison continued, methodically working through the evidence. Business receipts from the first year, all showing Marcus as the sole proprietor. Client contracts with his signature alone. Then came the devastating parts. "Now, this document is interesting," Morrison said, holding up a paper. "It's a bank record, showing a transfer of $50,000 from Miss Davidson to her mother, Gloria Davidson, dated 3 years ago. Miss Davidson, can you explain this transfer?" Melissa's face went white. That was a loan to my mother. Did she repay it?" Silence. "Your Honor," Carlton interjected, "I failed to see the relevance." "The relevance, Counselor, is that Miss Davidson claims she invested $200,000 of her inheritance into her husband's business. Yet here's a $50,000 transfer to her mother. Here's another for $30,000. Here's a $45,000 purchase of a luxury car. In total, I see transfers and purchases totaling approximately $180,000, none of which went to Marcus Steel and Design. So where exactly did this claimed business investment come from?" Carlton said nothing. Melissa stared at the table. Morrison continued, "But what's truly fascinating is this next set of documents. Mr. Bryant has provided emails between Miss Davidson and her mother, dating back 2 years. Let me read one, dated January 10th, 2 years ago. Miss Davidson writes, "Mom, you were right. I need to position myself to take the business when I'm ready." Marcus is so focused on his work. He doesn't notice what I'm changing in the documents. I've already modified 3 client contracts to list myself as primary contact. When the time comes, I'll have everything I need. The courtroom erupted. The few spectators gasped. Carlton looked like he might be sick. Melissa's face was crimson. "Your Honor," Carlton tried, "email can be faked, which is why Mr. Bryant provided access to the original email server, which I had our IT specialist verify this morning. They're genuine. Would you like me to read more? There are dozens. Miss Davidson and Mrs. Davidson discussing how to forge investment documents, how to manipulate business records, how to manufacture a narrative that Miss Davidson was the true owner. There's even discussion of hiring a specific lawyer, you, Mr. Simmons, because of your reputation for aggressive asset seizure." Carlton sat down heavily. "But wait," Morrison said, and Marcus could swear he saw the judge fighting a smile. "It gets better. Mr. Bryant also submitted audio recordings. Minnesota is a one-party consent state, and Mr. Bryant was present for all these recordings, making them legal. And one, recorded in the marital home 6 months ago. Miss Davidson and Mrs. Davidson discussed their plan explicitly. Would the court like to hear it? No, Melissa said quickly. No, please. I think we should, Morrison said. He nodded to the bailiff, who set up an audio player. Melissa's voice came through the speakers, clear and damning. Mother, Marcus is such an idiot. He actually thinks I love him. When we're done, he'll have nothing. The business will be mine, the house will be mine, and he'll go back to being a nobody welder in some garage. Carlton said with the documents we've created. There's no way Marcus can fight it. Gloria's voice responded. Good. He never deserved you. Once you have the business, we'll sell it and you can find a real husband. Someone from a proper family. Melissa's laugh. God, remember when he proposed? With that cheap ring? I should have known then he'd never amount to anything without my help. The recording stopped. The silence was deafening. Melissa was crying now, but they weren't sympathetic tears. She looked trapped, desperate. Gloria's face was stone, her eyes filled with hate as she stared at Marcus. Morrison set down his papers. Miss Davidson, you've committed perjury in my courtroom. You've presented forged documents. You've attempted to defraud your husband of his life's work. Mrs. Davidson, you've conspired in this fraud. He turned to Carlton. Mr. Simmons, did you know these documents were forged? Carlton stood, his voice shaking. Your Honor, I relied on my client's representations. I had no knowledge. I believe you, counselor. But you'll want to distance yourself from this client immediately. Carlton nodded, looking relieved. Morrison looked at Marcus. Mr. Bryant, I'm prepared to rule. But first, is there anything else? Marcus stood. Just one more thing, Your Honor. I want to show why the business is worth what it's worth. He pulled out a portfolio. These are designs I created. Every major commission, every featured piece, I designed it. I built it. I installed it. Here's documentation from clients confirming they hired Marcus Steele and designed specifically for my work. Here's testimony from 3 employees confirming I do all design and fabrication work, while Miss Davidson handled only basic scheduling. The business is worth $8 million. Because of my skill, my reputation, my art. He set down the portfolio. Miss Davidson tried to steal my life's work. She tried to take everything I built and leave me with nothing. I just want what's mine. Morrison nodded slowly. The court finds the following. Marcus Steele and Design was founded solely by Marcus Bryant with his own capital and resources. Miss Davidson's claims of financial investment are fabricated. The documents submitted by Miss Davidson are forgeries. Miss Davidson has committed perjury and attempted fraud. He looked directly at Melissa. Miss Davidson, you will receive nothing from this marriage. No portion of the business. No alimony, nothing. You're fortunate I'm not holding you in contempt, but I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal prosecution. You have attempted to steal $8 million through fraud. That's grand theft by any definition. Melissa was sobbing now. Gloria stood, shouting, This is ridiculous. My daughter deserves. Your daughter deserves prison. Morrison snapped. Sit down, Mrs. Davidson, or I'll hold you in contempt. Gloria sat, shaking with rage. Morrison continued. Furthermore, the marital home was purchased with Mr. Bryant's business earnings. It belongs to him. Joint savings will be divided equally. That's $40,000 for each party. But that's all Miss Davidson will receive. Mr. Bryant, Marcus Steele and Design is yours, free and clear. This court orders Miss Davidson to surrender any and all business documents, keys, passwords, and access within 24 hours. He banged his gavel. Divorce granted. This hearing is concluded. Marcus let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. It was over. He'd won. Bernard grabbed his shoulder. Holy shit, Marcus. That was. I've never seen anything like that. Why didn't you show me all of this earlier? Because I needed you to be genuine, Marcus said quietly. If you'd known what I had, you might have acted differently. I needed them to think they were winning until the moment they lost. Bernard shook his head in amazement. You played them perfectly. Across the courtroom, Carlton was gathering his papers, avoiding Melissa's desperate attempts to speak with him. Gloria was on her phone, Probably calling someone to rant about the injustice. Melissa just sat, destroyed. Marcus walked past them without a word. He'd said everything he needed to say. But as he reached the door, Melissa's voice stopped him. "Marcus, wait. Please." He turned. She looked small now, fragile. All her confidence stripped away. "This wasn't supposed to happen like this," she said. "I thought. Carlton said we'd win. He said you couldn't fight it." "You thought I was stupid," Marcus said calmly. "You thought I was just a dumb craftsman who wouldn't notice his wife plotting to destroy him. But that was your mistake, Melissa. I built an $8 million business from nothing. You think I'm not smart enough to see you coming?" "We were married," she whispered. "Doesn't that mean anything?" "It did. To me. But you and your mother? You saw me as a mark, someone to use and discard. Well, congratulations. You got exactly what you deserved." He walked out of the courtroom into sunlight that felt brighter than it had in months. 3 days later, Marcus stood in his workshop, his legally confirmed, solely owned workshop. The business accounts had been secured, new locks installed, all of Melissa's access revoked. She'd turned over the keys and passwords without further fight. The threat of criminal prosecution had a remarkable way of ensuring cooperation. The district attorney had indeed opened an investigation. Bernard said Melissa and Gloria would likely face charges for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Carlton Simmons had already filed a motion to withdraw as their attorney and was reportedly furious about being used in their scheme. Marcus's phone rang. "A client. Mr. Bryant? I heard about your divorce. I just wanted to say, I'm glad it worked out. Your work is exceptional, and I've got another project I'd like to discuss." More calls came throughout the day. Clients checking in, offering support, wanting to hire him for new projects. Word had spread about the courtroom showdown. Instead of damaging his reputation, the whole affair had somehow enhanced it. Marcus Bryant, the artist who'd built an empire from nothing and defended it against his own wife. He was welding a new piece when Bernard stopped by that evening. The DA called, Bernard said. "Melissa's trying to cut a deal. She'll plead guilty to lesser charges if they don't prosecute her mother." "What do you think?" Marcus asked. "I think Gloria was the mastermind. But Melissa still forged those documents. She's an adult who made her choices." Bernard paused. "What do you want?" Marcus thought about it. The anger had faded, replaced by something calmer. "Tell the DA I won't oppose whatever they decide. I got what I want in my business, my life back. The legal system can handle the rest." That's generous considering what she tried to do. It's not generous. It's closure. "I'm done letting them live in my head rent-free." After Bernard left, Marcus returned to his work. The piece he was building was a custom gate for a private estate, intricate scrollwork, incorporating the client's family history. It would take weeks to complete, require absolute precision, and pay enough to hire another assistant. This was what he loved. Not the money, though that was nice. Not the recognition, though he appreciated it. He loved the work itself. The challenge of taking raw metal and transforming it into art. The satisfaction of solving complex design problems. The tangible proof that his hands and mind could create something beautiful and lasting. Melissa never understood that. She saw the business as a means to an end: money, status, security. She never grasped that, for Marcus, the business was the art, and the art was everything. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You destroyed my daughter's life. I hope you're proud. Way." Gloria. Still bitter, still blaming everyone but herself. Marcus deleted the text and blocked the number. Some people would never learn. Gloria had raised Melissa to be entitled, greedy, and contemptuous of people who actually worked for a living. Now, both were facing consequences for that worldview. He thought about sending a response, something cutting, but what was the point? He'd already won the only battle that mattered. A week later, Marcus was featured in a local business magazine. "How I Built Marcus Steel and Design. One Artist's Journey," the headline read. The article detailed his start, his techniques, his philosophy. It mentioned the divorce only in passing. Bryant recently prevailed in a difficult legal battle that confirmed his sole ownership of the company. The article brought more clients, more recognition. Marcus hired 2 new assistants to help with the growing workload. He moved into a larger workshop. He started dating again, casually, nothing serious. He was rediscovering what it meant to live without someone undermining him. Life was good. Better than good. 6 months after the divorce, Marcus received a call from Bernard. "You might want to sit down," Bernard said. Melissa and Gloria took a plea deal. Melissa got 2 years probation, community service, and restitution. She has to pay you $50,000 for legal fees and damages. Gloria got 1 year probation. Carlton Simmons is facing a bar investigation for not properly vetting his client's documents, though he'll probably survive it. 2 years probation? Marcus was surprised. That's it? First offense, no prior record. They showed remorse well. They claimed to. The DA figured a criminal record and public humiliation was punishment enough. Plus, you got your business, and they got nothing. The judge considered that when sentencing. Marcus thought about it. 2 years of probation wasn't much for attempted fraud of $8 million. But then, they'd already lost everything that mattered. Melissa's reputation was destroyed. Gloria's social standing, which she valued more than anything, was ruined. They'd be known forever as the mother-daughter duo who tried to steal a man's business and failed spectacularly. "I can live with that," Marcus said finally. "There's one more thing," Bernard added. "Gloria's lawyer contacted me. Apparently, she's trying to sell her house to cover legal fees. She's broke. The divorce and criminal cases cleaned her out." The irony was rich. Gloria, who'd looked down on Marcus for working with his hands, was now penniless while he was thriving. "Thanks for letting me know," Marcus said. "And Bernard, thanks for everything. You did the heavy lifting, Marcus." I just stood there looking professional. After hanging up, Marcus walked through his expanded workshop. 3 employees worked on different projects: a staircase, a gate, a sculptural installation. All his designs, all his vision. He'd built this, not with family money or connections or fraud, with skill, determination, and 8 years of relentless work. Melissa had wanted to take it all and leave him with nothing. Instead, she'd lost everything while he gained something invaluable: the unshakable knowledge that he'd earned every bit of his success. No one had given it to him. No one could take it away. His phone rang again. A new client, a hospital commissioning a memorial sculpture for their lobby. High profile, prestigious, well-paying. Marcus smiled and answered the call. This was his life now. The one he'd built himself. The one he defended and won. And it felt damn good. 1 year after the divorce, Marcus received an unexpected visitor at his workshop. He was training a new apprentice when the door opened and a woman walked in. Not Melissa. He recognized her, though: Johanna McCarthy, Melissa's cousin. They'd met a few times at family events. "Marcus," she said, looking uncomfortable. "Can we talk?" He stepped outside with her. "What's this about?" "I wanted to apologize," Johanna said. "I knew what Melissa and Aunt Gloria were planning. Not all of it, but enough. I should have warned you." Marcus studied her. "Why didn't you?" "Family loyalty, I guess. And honestly, I didn't think they'd go through with it. I thought it was just talk, just bitterness." She looked down. "I was wrong. What they did to you was monstrous." "Yeah, it was. Melissa's life is a disaster now," Johanna continued. "She's working retail, living with Gloria in a tiny apartment. No one from the family talks to them anymore. They're pariahs. And Gloria, she's just angry all the time. Bitter. She blames you for everything." "Of course she does. I just wanted you to know that not everyone in that family supported what they did. Some of us think you're amazing for building what you built, and I'm sorry for not speaking up." Marcus nodded. "I appreciate you saying that." Johanna left, and Marcus returned to his work. The visit was strange but somehow satisfying. Even Melissa's own family had turned on her. He thought about Melissa working retail, living in poverty with her mother. Part of him, a small, vindictive part, felt satisfaction. But mostly, he just felt relief. Relief that he'd escaped. Relief that his life was his own again. That evening, Marcus had dinner with Naomi McIntosh, a structural engineer he'd been seeing for 3 months. She was smart, independent, and genuinely interested in his work. No games, no manipulation, just honesty. "You seem happy," Naomi said over dessert. "I am," Marcus realized. "For the first time in years, I actually am." "Think you'll ever get married again?" "Maybe. Someday. When I find someone who sees me as a partner, not a paycheck." Naomi smiled. "Good answer." They walked through the city after dinner, talking about everything and nothing. Marcus thought about how different this felt from his time with Melissa. No tension, no hidden agendas. Just two people enjoying each other's company. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. Whatever it was could wait. Later, he checked. An email from a museum curator in Chicago. They wanted to commission a major installation for their modern art wing. The budget was substantial, the exposure invaluable. Marcus smiled and started mentally sketching designs. Life kept getting better. The business grew. His reputation spread beyond the region. He was invited to speak at design conferences, featured in national magazines. Awards started coming recognition from his industry peers for excellence in metalwork and sculpture. Every success felt earned because it was earned. Every piece of recognition meant something because no one had manufactured it for him. He'd built this life with his own hands and mind, and no one could ever take that away. 2 years after the divorce, Marcus received one final communication from Melissa, a letter, handwritten, delivered to his workshop. Marcus, it read, I know you probably hate me. I deserve that. I've had 2 years to think about what I did, and I'm ashamed. Mother convinced me you were beneath me, that you didn't deserve what you'd built. I believed her because it was easier than admitting I was jealous of your talent and success. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I understand now. You built something beautiful, and I tried to destroy it because I couldn't stand that you did it without needing me. I thought I was essential, but I was just along for the ride. You're going to do amazing things, Marcus. I wish I could have been the partner you deserved instead of the anchor I became. I'm sorry. For everything. Melissa. Marcus read the letter twice, then filed it away. Not in the trash, he wasn't angry enough for that anymore. But not somewhere prominent either. It was closure, nothing more. He'd moved on. Built a new life. Found someone who appreciated him for who he was, not what he could provide. His business thrived. His art evolved. He was happy. That was the best revenge, not destruction, but success. Not tearing them down, but building himself up. Melissa and Gloria had tried to take everything, and in doing so, they'd given him something invaluable, the absolute certainty of his own worth. Marcus Bryant had started with $3,000 and a dream. He'd built an empire, lost it all in a courtroom, and won it back with preparation, intelligence, and unshakable proof of his own work. Some stories end with dramatic confrontations and public destructions. This one ended with a man standing in his workshop at midnight, welding a new piece, completely at peace with himself and his life. He'd faced his enemies and won. Not through violence or escalation, but through patience and proof. He'd let them think they were winning, let them commit fully to their fraud, then destroyed them with the truth. It was elegant, efficient, and most importantly, it worked. Marcus finished the weld, examined it critically, and nodded in satisfaction. Perfect. Like everything else he built,